Good morning, everyone. Again, a new class, and this time the topic is passive voice. All of you know what passive voice is, but we still need to recapitulate the meaning. The passive voice is used when we want to emphasize the action, that means verb, and the object of a sentence rather than subject. Okay, so all of you know what passive voice is. You have been changing sentences from active to passive voice previously as well. We'll just look at an example, and that would give you a better idea. You'll just be able to remember everything pretty well. So active voice here is he killed them. Okay, when we change it into the passive voice, it becomes they were killed. Okay, so going back to the meaning, the passive voice is used when we want to emphasize the verb, the action, right? So, and the object of a sentence rather than the subject. So, in the active, it was he, the subject, but in the passive, we want to emphasize the object and the action. So, the emphasis in the passive voice is on the object, which becomes the subject now. They were killed. The object of the active is emphasized on when we use the passive voice. So, they were killed is what the passive voice says. Okay. Now, let us look at a few steps here. Places of subject and object to be interchanged. That is what I discussed just now. The places of subject and object are to be interchanged when we change an active voice to the passive voice. Okay. The third form of the verb, that is past participle, must be used. Yeah. Preposition by to be used after the verb. So these are some very important things. You always need to remember that when you are framing a sentence in passive voice, you always should use the third form, that is the past participle of the verb, and there should be preposition by used after the verb. Now, there's a note, active to passive is possible only with transitive sentences. So, transitive sentences are those which have an object, where the action passes from the subject over to an object. Okay, so those are transitive sentences, and transformation of sentences from active to passive voice is only possible with transitive sentences, right? Now, let us look at the rules here. So, this is something that is going to help you in a better way. Now, present, in the present tense, if it is a simple present, then active voice says Ria writes a letter, passive is a letter is written by Ria, is written. Okay. Then continuous, Ria is writing a letter, passive becomes a letter is being written. Okay, is being written by Ria. Perfect, Ria has written a letter. In the passive, it becomes a letter has been written by Ria. Alright. With all these helping verbs, you should take a note that we are all the time using past participle. Okay. Now, perfect continuous. Ria has been writing a letter. Well, the perfect continuous tense cannot be changed into the passive voice. So, there is no change here. Okay. Let us look at the next one now. Past. Past tense, simple past. Ria wrote a letter. A letter was written by Ria. Okay. In the previous example, it was simple present, so we used is. Okay. Now it is past, simple past, so we use was, and along with that, that's a constant, which is the third form of the verb, written. Continuous. Ria was writing a letter. A letter was being written by Ria. Perfect. Ria had written a letter. A letter had been written by Ria. Had been written by Ria. Perfect continuous. Ria had been writing a letter. Again, there is no change. As I told you, perfect continuous forms do not have a passive voice or cannot be changed into passive voice. Okay. Now, future tense. Simple future, Ria will write a letter. A letter will be written by Ria. Okay. Continuous, Ria will be writing a letter. This future continuous tense can also not be changed into the passive voice. Okay. Now, future perfect, Ria will have written a letter. Passive voice says a letter will have been written by Ria. Will have been written. Perfect continuous, Ria will have been writing a letter. Again, there is no change as it is perfect continuous. It cannot be changed into the passive voice. Right? So, these are some rules that you need to remember. Okay? Specifically of the passive voice. Now, let us look at the uses. When the object is to be made prominent, we use passive voice when we want to make the object prominent, okay? When we want to lay emphasis on the object. So, example here is the ball was hit by him. So, the ball is something that we want to lay emphasis on. So, we use passive voice so that the object becomes the subject here. Okay. When the doer is not known. So, passive voice is used when we do not know the doer, but the action is more important, right? So, the patient was carried home. The patient was carried home. Here, the object of the subject has to, of the previous voice or the active voice actually is made the subject, right? So, the subject here is the patient. When we do not know who the doer was, but then the action is more important and the object is again to be laid emphasis on, then we use the passive voice. The patient was carried home. Okay. In official correspondence, when we write in our professional worlds, when we want to pass on a message, an official message, then passive voice is used. Okay, you are informed to submit the documents by the end of the week. So that is how the sentence goes. That's in a passive voice. You are informed to. Okay, to make the tone more polite, can the books be removed from the table? Is how we, if we want to not sound rude, instead of saying remove the books from the table, to make it more polite, this is a proper way. Can the books be removed from the table? Okay. So, we use passive voice to sound more polite. Next, generally used in science, factual and journalistic writing, comet linear will be visible in the northern hemisphere. Okay. Before the arrival of monsoon, pits are dug and manure is put in. So, these sort of sentences where we are talking about some facts or some scientific things are being put forth, journalistic ways of writing, passive voice is used then. Okay. So, these were the uses of passive voice. Now, exercise. Passive voice is question number 26 in the paper. So, we write question number 26. Okay. A few years ago, a murder dash within brackets is commit, the case dash within brackets try in the most judicial manner, the criminal dash sentence to death. Okay. Now, you have to use these verbs in the passive form. So, the answer is a few years ago a murder was committed, the case was tried, the criminal was sentenced. All right. So this is an example here. Let us look at the next one. Okay, that was an example. This is now the assignment that you have. Okay, the war against the earth began with this idea of separateness. Its contemporary seeds dash sow when the living earth transformed into dead matter. To facilitate the industrial revolution, diversity dash replaced by monocultures. So you have to use the correct form of the verb in the passive voice to fill up these blanks here. Okay, the next example, next exercise is this. Navdanya, the movement for biodiversity conservation and organic farming dash start in 1987. More than 3,000 rice varieties dash save. Now biodiversity intensive form of farming dash practice by many farmers across the country. So this is the second one. The third one is again from the same lesson. As I told you in the previous video that the exercises of grammar are taken up from the lesson, okay, from your prose portion. So you ought to be pretty careful. You should go through the lessons as well. That will help you in solving these problems and these questions properly. Okay, this one is forest plays an important role in shaping a civilization. The culture of Indian civilization dash fuel by the culture of the forest. This culture dash influence by the diverse processes of renewal of life which are at play in the forest. Besides, human beings dash teach union and compassion by it. Alright. The lessons learned by Vandana Shiva about diversity dash transfer to the protection of biodiversity. Thus Navdanya farm dash start in the Doon Valley and it dash locate at in the lower elevation Himalayan region. So these were a few assignments that you are supposed to do. Solve the assignments, the exercises, write the answers and send it to me or to sir. And unless and until you solve these assignments and keep regularly sending them, you will not be able to get a hang of what we are teaching you. That is something we would want to tell you. The videos are to be watched regularly and the assignments are to be taken up seriously so that you understand what is being told to you, because that is the only way that we can come across, right? So please go through the video. If there are any problems, if there are any questions, feel free to get back to us, okay? Or if everything is fine, you have understood all, then write the assignment and send it, all right? So that's about it for today. Have a good day. Thank you.